Okay, pre-calc, this lesson is going to be dealing with the difference quotient. The first thing we have to know here, okay, is what the difference quotient formula says. Okay, this is something that you're going to deal a lot with when you get to calculus, so let's make sure algebraically we know how to do the work. The first thing we do is f of x plus h. So the first thing we're going to do is plug a quantity into the function. Okay. Then the second thing we're going to do is subtract that whole function. Subtract that whole f of x function. Finally, the entire thing gets divided by h, and then of course we have to make sure that h does not equal 0, otherwise we would be undefined. Okay. This algebra is a little large. Okay, so here's how I recommend you do this. Okay, so here's the steps. Here's the steps. So step 1, I want you to find f of x plus h all by itself. Since that is a very large expression sometimes, it's helpful to just find that off to the side. Okay, and then finally step 2, then calculate the difference quotient. Because since these are two separate steps, we have to make sure that we label. Okay, so I'm going to put a note right here. Make sure you label, label, label. You just can't start calculating things without having it labeled. Okay, so step 1. The first thing I'm going to do for this f of x equation is find f of x plus h. Okay, it is super important that you write f of x plus h equals, okay, so that I know what you're doing. So here's the function, okay, and x is the input. So x is the input there, okay, and there's another input here. Okay, so I need to take my input, which happens to be a quantity. I have to do x plus h, the quantity squared. Input has to get squared. Plus 5 times input. Input squared plus 5 times input plus 5 times, okay, and what's the input? Oh yeah, this quantity, x plus h. Okay, now we have to do the algebra work here. Okay, so please use some equal signs. What does this equal? Okay, when you have a quantity squared like this, I highly recommend that you write it down 2 times. All right, this is going to definitely help a lot of people catch some mistakes. Okay, I'm going to distribute the 5 here, plus 5x plus 5h. Okay, and now I see here that we're going to have to FOIL this out. So first, the outers plus the inners, xh plus xh is plus 2xh plus h squared. Oh, plus 5x plus 5h. Okay, please make sure, okay, right here when you have x plus h, quantity squared, let's just put a little note, okay, and let's say write 2 quantities. I think we talked about this before. Writing out 2 times helps with the foiling. So right here we had to do a little bit of distributing, right? Okay, now that is step 1. Find f of x plus h. Okay, and it is rather large. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and separate the paper. We're now going to get to step 2. Okay, and step 2 is calculate the difference quotient. So we're going to say difference quotient equals. All right, this was f of x plus h, and this is something else. You can't just keep putting equal signs. Stop. This is something new. Okay, this is going to be this entire fraction, this huge fraction, okay, that has the h in the bottom. All right, now what are we supposed to put there? First, we have to put the answer that we got for f of x plus h. So I'm going to copy the expression that we just calculated. Okay, then we have to subtract the function. Okay, this says subtract the function. So I have to subtract f of x. Oh, here's f of x, and I have to subtract all of his terms. Everything has to get subtracted. I have to subtract the x squared, and I have to subtract the 5x. you subtract all of his terms, minus, minus. Okay, so this is the setup for difference quotient. Good thing we found this before, because this was a lot of work. We subtract the function, and we have to say over h. Okay, now a couple things are going to happen if you're doing it right. Okay, the first thing I notice here, x squared minus x squared. We have plus 5x minus 5x, okay? So stuff cancels. Okay, if you're doing it right, that will always happen. All right, so what does that leave us with? We have 2xh plus h squared plus 5h all over h. Okay. Now, this says divide by h, okay, but I noticed that all the terms have an h. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to factor an h out. I'm going to factor it out, and that's going to leave us with 2x. I factored out his h, okay, plus 1h, because I factored 1 away, plus 5 all over h. Okay, so then the next thing that you're always going to do is factor out the h. Okay, factor it out. Write it as a new line. Take an h away from all the terms. All right, now if you're doing this correctly, okay, look at this. Okay, we're going to cancel an h. Okay, if you're doing it correctly, that will always happen. And so the difference quotient is 2x plus h plus 5. Okay, you're gonna get the hang of this. Certain things are always going to happen. Okay, remember, stuff's always going to cancel. Okay, it always should cancel. You're always going to be able to factor out an h. Okay, if you can, it's working. If you can't, you did something wrong. You're always going to be able to cancel out that h and have no denominator. Okay, that's how the difference quotient works. All right, let's keep going. Let's find the difference quotient for a quadratic like this. Okay, now remember, we said that there were 2 steps. So the first thing that I want you to do, okay, is draw a line right here, separate the page, because we're going to do the big chunk of work, then we're going to do it. Okay, so step 1 is to find f of x plus h. Okay, and then step 2 is when we're going to actually do the difference quotient. Okay, and our f of x right here, our f of x is 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. Okay, and so what does this say? 2 times input squared. 2 times input squared. 2 times the input has to get squared. Okay, and what's the input? The quantity x plus h. Then I have to subtract 3 times input. Minus 3 times, and what's the input? Oh yeah, x plus h. Okay, and don't forget, it says plus 1. All right, so we have to do some work here. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure I write this quantity 2 times, right? X plus h times x plus h. If you don't write it 2 times, people accidentally say x squared plus h squared. That's not correct. Okay, right here, we're going to distribute a negative 3. Minus 3x minus 3h plus 1. Okay, let's FOIL this out. Maybe you remember from last time what this makes. You're going to do it so often, you're going to learn it for sure. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Let's write down the rest of the expression. You don't ever want to lose part of it. And finally, we'll distribute the 2. So what does f of x plus h make? It makes 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3x minus 3h plus 1. Okay, you could see why I suggest doing f of x plus h first. That is the bulk of the work right there. Okay, now the second thing we have to do, okay, is the difference quotient, but we have to know what that formula is. Okay, difference quotient equals. Remember, it's a fraction, right? Do you remember what goes in the denominator? Yeah, an h. Okay. Now there's two things here, f of something and f of something. Okay, and there's a subtraction sign between them. This is going to be x plus h, and this is just f of x. Okay, so there's two f's, there's two x's, there's two h's, one plus sign, one minus sign. Okay, we have to know the difference quotient formula to be successful with this. Okay, so difference quotient, here I go. Okay, it's all over h. Okay, you can't just magically have the h appear later. Step one, the difference quotient gets the h. All right, it's really important that this work gets labeled as f of x plus h. This work gets labeled difference quotient. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is copy my f of x plus h. Let's write down what we got from before. Minus 3x minus 3h plus 1. Okay, now what does it say? Subtract f of x. Subtract f of x. Let's go find f of x again. I have to subtract this. All of his terms, I have to minus, minus, minus. Okay, so the first thing is going to be minus 2x squared. Now be careful, because when you subtract a minus 3x, a minus minus, we're going to write plus 3x minus 1. Okay, here's your f of x. Now remember what was supposed to happen if you're getting it correct. Okay, things should cancel. 2x squared minus 2x squared. Negative 3x, positive 3x. Positive 1, negative 1. Okay, stuff's going to cancel. As soon as it cancels, you need to write the new line. I need to write the new line. The difference quotient is 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h, cancel, cancel. Oh, that's it. All over h. Do not forget to write over h. That's part of the formula, and it needs to be there. Okay, now what was the second step? What's the next thing I should do? Yeah, we're going to factor out an h. Okay, so I'm going to take the h away, 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 and then I'm going to write what's left. So that leaves us with 4x. Plus, take an h away from him. Now he's just 2h minus 3 all over h. Okay, I don't want you to write an h right here. I want you to take it out and tell me what's left. Okay, what's the next step in the difference quotient? Yeah, we're going to cancel out these h's. H divided by h cancels, and the difference quotient for this problem is 4x plus 2h minus 3. That's the difference quotient. Okay. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, this one's a linear function. The steps are still the same. Okay, remember how you're supposed to divide your paper into two? Okay, there's step 1 and step 2. Step 1 is to find f of x plus h. Step 2 is when I'll do the difference quotient. I want to make sure I label these differently. I can't just have work that keeps going. This step is not equal to this. This is a different calculation. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is plug this quantity into the function. The function says 17 times input. 17 times input. 17 times, and the input here is the quantity x plus h. Minus a 9. Okay. Oh, this one's actually really easy. I don't have to FOIL this up. I just have to distribute. So this is 17x plus 17h minus 9. Okay. Now, how about difference quotient? To do this properly, I need to know the formula. Okay, so the first thing I do is draw the big fraction bar with the h, right? Okay, now what do you put first? In the front, we put what we got for f of x plus h. So write down the expression that you just calculated. Okay. And then we're supposed to subtract f of x. Okay, I have to subtract this function. I have to subtract. So minus 17x, and then a minus makes a positive 9. Okay, this is a difference quotient. Now what's going to happen here? I hope things cancel, right? All of these terms here should cancel. Cancel. After you cancel the terms, you need to write it down. Okay, you can't start dividing and factoring until you clean it up and tell me what you have. If you do too much at once, I won't be able to tell what you did first and what you did second. Okay, if you write this down, it's very clear you canceled those terms. Okay, and now what are you doing second? You don't really need to factor. You can just cancel these h's. So the difference quotient here is actually just 17. Okay? And here's a really easy way of checking. Okay, if your function is linear, okay, what do you notice about the answer of the difference quotient? What do you notice? The difference quotient is equal to the slope. Okay, so you can tell if your work is going to be correct. All right, but you still have to walk me through the steps, right? Okay, so what does difference quotient mean? Okay, let's explore this graphically. Okay, what are we doing here? Some people still don't know what are we doing. Okay, so let's take a look at a graph. All right, and I'm going to put a couple points on this graph. So how about right here? Let's go, I don't know, let's go right here and call this x. Okay, so this is the point, x, comma, what? Well, we're not going to say y. I want to say in terms of x. In terms of x. The y value is going to be f of x. X, and then f of x. That's another way of saying y, right? All right, now let's move down farther along the x-axis. I don't know. Let's go yay far. Let's go h. Let's go h units to the right. Okay. So where are we now? Where are we? This was a distance of x. I go a distance of h. So now we're at x plus h. Okay. And what point are we at right here? This is the point x plus h. Okay, comma, and then what's the y value for that? Yeah, the y value is going to be f of that input, x plus h. Okay, and then I know that we studied the average rate of change. And the average rate of change is kind of like talking about the slope. So how does it change from this point to this point on average? How does it change? Okay. How does it change? So the average rate of change. I know it's a curvy graph, so it's not really a line. Okay, and so we're going to do the slope formula. Let's do y minus the y minus y, and then I'll do x minus the x value. Okay, and so what are we getting here? We're getting f of x plus h minus f of x all over h, okay, which is the formula for the difference quotient. The difference quotient tells you on average how the graph changes from point to point. Oh, that's awesome, okay? Can you state the formula for difference quotient? You have to know that formula to be successful, okay? I can find the difference quotient for linear. Remember, if it's linear, it's going to equal the slope. Okay, I can find it for quadratic and for cubic. Okay, and let's just make a note here that x plus h quantity squared, you should write as x plus h times x plus h, and then you should FOIL it out. Okay, great job, guys.